Okay, in this video, I will be giving my response to a guy that is younger, in his 30s maybe, and he is placing all the blame for today's financial conditions on boomers, that they had pulled up the ladder, and every generation after the boomer generation is totally effed. So let's jump into this. Let's watch the video and I'll return and give my response to that.
When we hear that the boomer generation pulled the ladder up behind them, here's what we mean. The boomers' parents and grandparents in the late 1930s decided to pass Social Security. So the boomer generation was the first generation that was inherited this social program where they knew going to work, they were going to have some form of retirement through the government and the collective. Then in 1956, they decided to build the interstate highways. 41,000 miles of interstate highways was given to the boomer generation, and most of it was covered by the federal government. Then in 1965, they were given Medicare, so they knew when they retired that they were going to have health insurance. Medicaid was also passed around that time. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, housing was affordable. It wasn't looked at as an asset like it is today. It was just a thing that people were able to buy. And then you created the NIMBY mindset, not in my backyard. You got houses and then created zoning regulations and didn't want affordable housing coming in near your neighborhoods to prop up your value. In college in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when the boomers were in college, it was $300 a year, maybe up to $2,000 a year for state public schools. And as soon as the boomers graduated college, the administration at the time says, you know what, this college thing is not a public good, it's a private luxury. Let's put the burden on the family and on the students. And that led to $1.8 trillion of debt. And now we've had this much growth in 50 years, and we look around. Did our generation get any programs? Did we get free college, free healthcare, respectable paid maternity and paternity leave? Did we get a 4-day work week? We don't have high-speed rails. Yet, the silent generation and boomer generation leadership got us $40 trillion in debt. The only thing that has changed is we have given all the power to the corporations, not the people. We greenlit stock buybacks. We switched from pensions to 401ks. We allowed the dominance of private equity and leverage buyouts. We allowed super PACs to happen and racked up $40 trillion. It is not the individual boomer's fault who's watching this. We do not think that you maliciously voted to screw over your children's generation. We're asking for the accountability now. These are not predictions. We're looking in the past. There's proof. Please help us. How was your parents and grandparents able to provide things for you to make your life easier, and you guys aren't reciprocating and doing the same thing for us? That's our complaint. Work with us, please.
Okay, so the central problem with this clip, and it takes the programs created before the boomers had political power and describes them through boomers, though boomers created benefits for themselves and then they deliberately denied them to everyone else. The clip specifically points to Social Security and Interstate Highway System, Medicare, affordable housing, college costs, pensions, zoning, corporate policy, and the natural debt. National, not natural. Here we go again with this hidden that boomers climbed some wonderful ladder our parents built for us, got to the top, and then pulled it up so nobody else could follow. I think that's a bunch of BS. Let's start with Social Security. Social Security was passed in 1935. The oldest baby boomer wasn't even born yet until 1946. Our grandparents and our grandparents created that. We paid into it through payroll taxes, just like workers do today. Then he brings up the Interstate Highway System. The major Interstate Highway System was passed in 1956. Now listen, the oldest baby boomers were about 10 years old. We weren't sitting in Congress deciding to build ourselves highways. Eisenhower and the Congress, largely made up of parents, our parents' generation, did that. The boomers' parents. And yes, the federal government paid roughly 90% of the construction costs. But much of that federal share was financed through highway user taxes and highway trust funds. Then there's Medicare. Medicare passed in 1965. Now listen, the oldest boomers We're 19, the oldest one. And Medicare wasn't created for 19-year-old boomers. It was created primarily for Americans 65 and older, our grandparents and our parents. So already, three of the major examples supposedly provided that boomers built themselves this great, wonderful ladder where programs created for boomers were either children, teenagers, or, like in my case, weren't even born yet. Now, let's talk about the housing. This is where younger people have a legitimate complaint. Housing relative to income is much more difficult today in many parts of America. But saying boomers bought homes and then collectively decided, now let's make sure that our children can't. This is ridiculous. Did some older homeowners fight development? Oh, sure they did. Absolutely. Did restrictive zoner contribute to housing shortages? Absolutely. But zoning laws were invented by baby boomers, and every boomer in America didn't sit on a planning commission. Are you serious? Most people did then what people still do today. They bought the best house that they could afford in the neighborhood where they wanted to try to protect the value of their largest investment they would ever have. You can criticize some of those policies without turning 70 million individuals into one organized conspiracy. Then there's college. Yes, college became dramatically more expensive. And that's worth talking about. But again, there wasn't some meeting where boomers graduated from college and said, okay, boys, let's raise the tuition on our children. You know what? The universities changed. The government funding changed. Administration expenses went through the roof. Student lending expanded. Demand for degrees increased, and the labor market changed. And those developments happened over decades under politicians, university administrators, voters, business leaders who belong to multiple generations. And then we get into pensions, becoming 401k, stock buybacks, private equity, super PACs, and the national debt. Now we're blaming boomers for basically every economic and political decision made in America over the last, let's say, 50 years. That's not analysis. That's assigning a generation to play the villain. And here's the part I find very, very interesting. At the end, he admits that individual boomers didn't vote to screw their own children. Then stop talking about it. Because most boomers weren't senators. We weren't Federal Reserve governors. We weren't university presidents. We weren't even Fortune 500 CEOs. We were electricians. We were factory workers. We were teachers, nurses, truck drivers, mechanics, office workers, and small business owners. We worked, we paid taxes. We raised our families. We bought houses when we could afford them. We paid Social Security for what? In my case, 40 years. Some guys 40, 50, maybe longer. And now somehow we're being told that we climbed this ladder and deliberately kicked it away from everyone else. Nah. What actually happened is much less satisfying because there isn't just one boomer. America changed, the housing industry changed, higher education changed, healthcare changed, corporate America changed. And the economy became more complicated. And some of those changes Yeah, absolutely. They hurt younger generations. But if you want my help solving those problems, don't begin conversations telling me my entire generation caused every problem. Because the ladder wasn't built by boomers. It has been built, modified, regulated, financed, and screwed around with by generation after generation after generation. And if it's broken today, then instead of fighting about who supposedly pulled up this ladder, maybe all of us should start fixing that damn ladder. You guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye now.